When you have an informed opinion on any topic, then let your voice be heard. That is what we do on Express Yourself. Express Yourself is a production of the Drury University Department of Communication and the Drury University Debate Union, where we teach students the arts and skills of debating and then encourage them to apply those skills in various forms of civil discourse. Alexander Long, a senior from Mount Vernon, Missouri. Studying psychology, Andrew hopes to be a lawyer one day, and his favorite public speaker of all time in psychology is Ronald Reagan. Christopher Cassidy, a senior studying criminology and sociology from Nixa, Missouri. He wants to get his doctorate in criminology and continue to do research. His favorite speaker is Ronald Reagan. Kendall Stockard, a freshman studying French and marketing from Kansas City, Missouri. Kendall plans on going into nonprofit marketing. Her favorite speaker is Jimmy Fallon. Amarin Link, a sophomore majoring in education and writing from Mount Vernon, Missouri. Amarin wants to teach 4th grade and be a published novelist. He's a big fan of Eric Thomas. Our facilitator and moderator is Dr. Charlie DeBerry, director of the Drury University Debate Union. And now, here's Charlie.
Thank you and welcome to this program. Tonight we are discussing law enforcement and whether or not law enforcement officials should be required to wear body cameras. So let's go straight to the panelists and find out why we are discussing this issue. Kendall, what can you tell us about it?
Of course. I would like to talk about a specific incident that happened in June of 2013. There was a 14-year-old African-American boy who was holding a puppy, and he was tackled to the ground by a police officer and strangled to death because he gave him a dehumanizing stare. Which, one, that's not something that you can define. One, you can't kill a person just because they stared at you wrong. But two, when we look at this, the reason that such an incident like this didn't even make news is because we glorify these law enforcement officials, yet we don't have any transparency what is going on within these law enforcement agencies. And so because of that, we look at the fact that you have the incident like Michael Brown in Ferguson, and those should not be allowed to keep going on. Instead, we need to have some sort of transparency so we know what is going on in law enforcement agencies, but also for the law enforcement officials themselves, they also could benefit from this as well.
Let's see, Chris, what can you say to that?
Well, the problem with body cameras is they're extremely expensive. At the minimum cost to equip every officer, which is 957,000 police officers within the United States, with a body camera, it would cost over $400 million. Furthermore, assuming that for 1 hour of video equals 1 gigabyte of data, we would require 23 petabytes of data every day, which would equate out to $256 million every year. And so that money could be better spent somewhere else.
I see. Amron, tell me what you think.
I think that we should definitely be allowing police officers and requiring them to wear body cameras, but not for the same reasons that were presented by one of my fellow speakers up here. I think that the primary reasons for this are that it will be humanizing to police officers and really make the entire police force and general public feel better and safer as a whole, because there will be an accountability issue that will be able to have been recorded. It's going to prevent violence from happening, as a 2013 study at the University of Cambridge showed that when police wear body cameras, they're less likely to use violence, and respondents are less likely to use violence as well. And it drops the use of force by 50%. So that's a really good statistic there. And then finally, it shows us the human side of policing, where, we're going to see police officers chatting with their fellow officers, or with the public, or just sitting down having lunch. And we're going to see that this is a human person who is just living their lives. And that's really going to help everyone out as a whole, in my opinion.
That's interesting in terms of a way to humanize the police. Go ahead, Alex. Tell me what you think.
I think there's some privacy concerns that are being swept under the rug here. There are a lot of people that both do not like their videos or pictures being taken, and I believe there are even some religions that is against their religion, but I'll leave that off the table because I can't name which one that is. But both there are some privacy concerns. And I think we can't do that to people, because if a police officer is walking down the street, everybody they walk past, are we going to make them say, well, you're being recorded and this can be used against you? It's kind of like illegal search, in my opinion.
Well, I would like to respond to that. So, one, domestic surveillance is completely illegal. So the government can film anyone that they want. And secondly, but the privacy concerns that you look at when you look at police body cameras specifically, a victim who, say, someone has just been mugged and the police is responding to the scene. If the victim says, hey, I don't want to be on camera, the police can turn it off. And they'll have at least a victim saying, I don't want to be on camera, and turning it off at that point in time on video. So if you have a privacy concern, you can tell them no. And we know that this can happen because the Cleveland Police Department actually instituted body cameras themselves. And when they did that, they were told and trained that if someone asks you to turn this off, like a victim, during, say, you are interviewing them, you have to turn it off. And so there aren't as many privacy concerns as you would actually think when it comes to body cameras. And really, they're a necessary component for transparency for us as citizens so that we don't have to worry about it, but also so our police officers don't have to worry as well. They are given, if they didn't do anything wrong, they're going to be proved that they didn't do anything wrong.
That still doesn't address the problem, though, of filming the everyday citizen who's walking down the street. Of course, because the citizen, first off, each citizen can't go up and tell the police officer to turn off the camera. If the camera and if that did happen, then the cameras would be continuously off. And furthermore, that would it would be difficult for the police officer to remember under a time of stress when he needed the camera on during the first confrontation, which occurred, to actually remember to turn on the camera and to then proceed. Furthermore, that would take precious seconds away that the officer could have to defend himself.
Okay, when I said that, I was not saying that they're just going to turn it off and have it off all the time. What I was talking about is the fact that if a victim wants it turned off, they can have it turned off. Also, the fact is, like, even if the police officer is walking down the street and being filmed, it's not like the police are looking at this footage every day. The only time they look at this footage is when there's been a question about their conduct and what actually happened at a specific moment in a specific scene.
The problem comes, though, when it comes to civilians being filmed without their consent.
What problem is there? There's tons of domestic surveillance that goes on in this country, and yet you don't complain about that. So why would you complain about something that's protecting you, but also protecting our police officers as well?
This did go on, and there was a massive amount of complaints when the NSA came out and when the Snowden released everything that the NSA was doing. You had a huge uprising in the country. Obviously, people do not like being surveyed or when they cannot give their consent to it.
But that is a completely different issue. That is monitoring
the issue
phone
is surveillance.
calls. It is not monitoring by video footage. Also, no one's just sitting there looking at this video footage every day, hour upon hour, just being like, oh, hey, that person's doing something random. No, they look at it when a specific issue has been called to light. It is a good thing.
Let's talk about something a little more pressing, I think, and that is, understandably, it's not everybody's favorite topic or issue to be filmed constantly, but whenever you enter into grocery stores, gas stations, anything like this, even certain streets, which I believe is now illegal, you're going to be filmed. And so it's not my favorite thing either. I don't look great all the time. I don't want people looking at me all the time, but the truth of the matter is that it happens a lot. And the importance of the police wearing these cameras is because in issues like Ferguson and Baltimore, we're going to know exactly what happened. And that is so important when we're talking about the deaths, no matter what color or anything that we're talking about. It matters what happened precisely, who's to blame. We don't send unnecessary people to prison. We don't let guilty people go free. And I think this issue is far more pressing than whether or not I have my face on some surveillance footage somewhere else, that people are treated correctly, and that the brutality, like we can see in this study that I mentioned, is dropped by 50% on both sides.
I would completely agree with you that this topic is very important, and it's something that would be of a great benefit to society. However, to put it into perspective, for the 957,000 police officers we have hired on right now, they are paid $459,360 per year. However, to equip them all with body cameras and for the cost of body cameras to store all the data, then we would be paying over $256 million, or would be paying over $660 million every year. We could hire on, for every police officer on the street, we could have one and a half more police officers for that cost.
Now that actually
issue-
breaks down though to about $3 per United States citizen per year. I mean, if you're really trying to look at cost as an issue, I'm not sure that it's a major barrier. It sounds like a lot, but if you multiply it times close to 300 plus million people, it's not a lot of money. And I want to go back to Alex for a minute because you brought up the privacy issue. Did you feel the same way about the fact that because of our, how do I want to word this, our current way of dealing with the terrorist issue, that your cell phones can be tapped, you can be monitored pretty much anytime you want to, anytime the government wants to monitor you, they can listen to your cell phone. I just haven't heard any outrage about some of these things, and I'm tending to look at what Amron's saying and saying we've got concrete examples of people suffering horrible abuse at the hands of the police. And we're looking for some way to address it other than just people using their cell phones.
Well, actually, there is a lot of outrage about things as such. Due to the fact that this country has the Constitution, and in the Constitution is some privacy rights that are given to us. And when those are taken away by tapping into cell phones, by needlessly videoing us all the time, and basically just surveillance in general. That's the issue right here, surveillance or privacy, which one's more important? And I think the American people very much so value their privacy, and there is a lot of uproar about these NSA tappings and whatnot.
Okay, Alex, what amendment in the Constitution says that you have the right to privacy?
Excuse me?
What amendment in the Constitution says that you have the right to privacy?
It's not so much the right to privacy per se. It's more of illegal search and seizures does deal with privacy.
So since when did video footage become a legal search and seizure? Because it never has been. And we also look at the fact that what is more important? Human lives that are dying at the hands of police and law enforcement because there's no way that they can be proved, especially in instances where the police took away people's cell phone cameras and told them they could not film what was going on. What's more important, those people who lost their lives?
I think you're missing the
someone's
point.
Privacy?
The point was not that it specifically said there is this right to privacy. It was that it's alluded to that there is this privacy, and American people very much so care about this privacy. That was the point that was being made.
And Michael Folcott, a sociologist back in the 80s, wrote in On Crime and Punishment, one of his famous books, that when people are surveyed, then they're going to nullify their behaviors. And when this occurs on nationwide, then the nation faces the risk of where each individual will lose their autonomy and their right to individual thinking. So this does play a huge role.
Well, I have to respect anyone who can understand Michael Foucault, but I want to suggest also that as far as behavior modification goes, how do you suggest we modify some of these atrocities that are going on with unfettered police who can simply, they have a brotherhood where they do not self-report. They stand behind each other, and how do we get at that if we don't have some kind of evidence?
I think the best way that we can tackle it right now is these police body cameras, because we've seen it work in Cleveland, we've seen it work in other places where they have it. 25% of the nation's about 1,700 police, actually 17,000 police agencies have body cameras. Also, we look at that in Cleveland where they have body cameras. About 40% of their police complaints against the police dropped because they could prove that, no, this police officer didn't hurt you. But in instances where police officers punched a woman repeatedly in the face who was hearing impaired because she couldn't follow their orders because she couldn't hear them for no reason. She wasn't armed. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She just couldn't hear them when they told her that she needed to move. They punched her in the face and put her in a coma, and yet they didn't report that.
I would actually question that if that actually happened, because that seems like something, I like to think I'm a well-informed citizen. And that seems like something that would make national attention to where that would be hard to miss, like the Ferguson, similar to the Ferguson event.
It happened in June of 2013. In 2013, we weren't hearing national news about this stuff going on because it wasn't reported. It's not things that 2013 people were not filming as much and were not questioning the police as much as they were last year when the Ferguson incident happened.
Well, but in 2012, we had we had the incident in Florida with Trayvon Martin, who was beaten. So this has been going on
But
since
Trayvon
2013.
Martin wasn't beaten by law enforcement. He was killed by a citizen, a regular citizen.
But this still goes into the same notion of that there's racial tensions going on within the U.S. of a perception of that whites are against African Americans.
But we're specifically what we can control is law enforcement. We can't control citizens. We can't put body cameras on all citizens. What we can do is we can monitor and increase transparency upon our law enforcement officials. And their only argument against not having body cameras is we don't want them to see us when we have to kill someone. That's wrong.
I want to speak towards a tone, an overtone of this entire debate discussion this evening before we conclude. And I want to speak to the tone directly against all police officers, because I believe that it is inherently wrong and deceptive of the American public to assume that each and every police officer on the force is a bad person simply because one or two officers stepped out of line this year. I think it's completely wrong. I think an advantage of body cameras is that we're going to see that not every one of these incidents was caused out of police brutality, that some were caused in simple self-defense or defense of what is a brotherhood in policemen who are protecting the general public. Though that I'm not saying that every single event of this has been carried out by completely morally upstanding officers, I do think it is wrong to throw them all into one giant mass and label it corrupt.
And building off of that, I would like to point out the National Police Misconduct Statistics, which is released annually by the FBI, showed that in 2013 there were 32,000 counts of police misconduct, of which 50% of those went to trial and 32% resulted in the arrest of a police officer. When you compare that to the trial of the cases that go to trial and result in a arrest for, or result in a sentence for the general public, those figures are much higher. Only 20% of cases go to trial, and only 10% result in the conviction of a felon. So really, we're holding police officers to a higher accountability standard than we are the general public.
That may be true, and part of that may be because they only prosecute police officers if they are dead to the wall, if the proof is so overwhelming that they won't prosecute it unless it's almost a sure thing, a victory. And whether or not these things make national news, and they're not all racist, and I see how it does protect police so that you can see that most of them are good people. But just yesterday's news showed this wasn't racial. It showed someone with a cell phone caught on camera two policemen who shot and killed I believe he was a 12-year-old or maybe even younger. I'm thinking maybe 6 or 7-year-old boy standing up in the back seat of the car. He was autistic. They shot and killed him and shot his father. And the police said that they were resisting arrest and that there was a warrant out and all the stuff. And someone on cell phone showed the cameras rolling with a cell phone, and the kid was just standing in the back seat, and the father was sitting in the front seat with his hands up. That's the kind of incident that body cameras we would catch more and more and more, and not rely on cell phones. But cell phones may be good enough.
Absolutely.
I don't know, but I think we're not trying to paint all police officers with a broad swath, but I do think there's some protection for police officers in this as well.
Absolutely.
I think the issue is more than just one or two instances a year, but I also think that when you look at statistics that come from law enforcement agencies themselves, I would take into consideration that you probably need some more validity than just coming from law enforcement agencies. There's been instances where they haven't reported these instances because of this brotherhood. It may not be every police officer, but what you want every police officer to have this so that you can prove the ones who are good and the ones that did this should get in trouble for it and should be held accountable, because it's not right that someone in Texas who is asthmatic was tasered to death during a drug raid when there was no drugs anywhere near the area. That is wrong. That shouldn't happen. And that with body cameras, you can make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay. Well, what I want to do is, I think we're starting to run a little long here. What I want to do is try to wrap this up. If you think that why don't you give me two opinions? One is if you think it will happen. Do you think it's likely to happen that the body cameras will be approved? And if so, what kind of pressure would it take for it to happen? What would cause it to happen? We can start. Alex, why don't we start with you? Do you think it might happen? What would it take to convince you that it would be a good idea?
Well, for it to happen, we're going to have a tax increase probably. So if the American people will pay for it, then all right, we'll have them. We'll probably need another big case where a body camera would have been helpful for it to get pushed. But I think it'll kind of come down to an issue of privacy, and we'll have to see what the American public wants.
And in my opinion, I would say that body cameras would be great. However, before we make any definitive decisions, I would like to see research where you do a qualitative study comparing the rate of body cameras or compared to better police training to see which would yield the better outcome. And whichever does, I would like to go with that method. However, if the American public is willing to pay for body cameras, then I would be absolutely in favor, having gone through the law enforcement academy myself, of body cameras. Almost every single officer I've talked, not almost every single officer I've talked to, but every single one I've talked to have said that they love body cameras and that they highly encourage all of us going through the academy to get them ourselves because they've saved them from so many troubles throughout their usage.
That's very interesting. Go ahead.
I think that there are some excellent things just proposed, and what I would say is, honestly, I think in a slightly different angle that we've reached the point where body cameras are a necessity. I think that when we're at this point where every single month we're seeing incidences rise up where a cell phone video has been released or word of mouth has been released and it's unclear what led up to this violent act. I think we need to know now what's going on, and I think it's to the benefit of both the civilians and the police. So I think it's time now, and I think what it's going to take is just a slight tax increase, and we could be able to get something like this in motion.
Right.
I definitely think that this is going to happen, especially since you already have some area police departments already implementing body cameras themselves, such as Cleveland, which was basically one of the first areas to implement these body cameras on a wide range and a wide scale. At the same time, I think that the more that video cameras show police brutality and the more that there's more news coverage over it, nationwide, not just local news coverage over it, I think that's going to push people to calling for this to happen and basically forcing it to happen.
Well, thank you, panelists, again for a fantastic job. I think it was an excellent discussion. And thank you, viewers for tuning in to today's program. If you would like to see more examples of Express Yourself, you can go to drury.edu/debate. And remember, the next time that you have a difference of opinion on any given topic, keep emotion out of it, stick to the facts, and never make it personal. And then when you're ready, express yourself. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.